So I hope everyone is doing okay. That just sitting is calm and clear. And remember, when we say calm and clear, we don't mean that we're not having thoughts, but we're choosing not to pay attention to them. I hear a lot of sounds outside my window. I don't deny they're there and I don't ignore them, but I don't follow them. I notice that they come and they pass. And I care more about the awareness that can notice the arising and passing of these sounds. In our moment-by-moment experience, we're observing the teaching of impermanence. It's something we never stop having to learn and observe, because as soon as we start focusing on something with a sense of like or dislike, then we're not appreciating its nature of impermanence anymore. So in understanding intuitively the nature of impermanence of all the things that you're experiencing is the antidote to attachment or aversion. It's simple teaching, but it's very effective. So you can like it, but it's going to pass. So your relationship to liking is easier and lighter. And you can dislike it. Remember, disliking and liking are the same, continuum. It's not like liking is so much better than disliking. Liking leads to attachment if it's made too strong. And disliking leads to aversion if it's made too strong. So we want to keep it light, light touch. Let the liking and disliking be. And don't identify so strongly with it. It happens. It's okay. Strong conditioning. So I notice the phenomena, like the noises. I notice my dislike of them because, I don't like the sound of the bus going by. I accept both the sound. I accept the form, which is a sound. I accept the feeling that it's unpleasant because it's loud. I accept my perception, it's a bus. And I even accept the fourth skanda of like seeing, having a relationship of dislike to that. Dislike is my sort of relationship. The second skanda of the feeling is just the displeasure. And displeasure and dislike are two different things. So I also accept that. So all those levels, I let them be because I know that the next moment it's changed completely. And I simply don't need to identify so strongly with how myself is being made by these levels of conditioning, or what we call skandhas. Yeah, it's just like happens. It's a happening. So myself is kind of a happening in this process, and I see it happening. So observing that happening allows me to have a little perspective that perspective is very helpful when I find myself getting a little too attached or, judgmental. So it comes from this sense of in one of the Zen schools, they talk about these three sort of main principles of not knowing. That's sort of the beginner's mind that Suzuki Roshi talks about, but other teachers call it not knowing. And the second tenet is the bearing witness. Bearing witness is observing without judgment. Bearing witness, being a witness to your life. Just observing it for all its good and bad. This is a meditative approach, okay? Now, what those two lead to, and this is where I want to get into my topic tonight. And of course, if anyone has a question or comment about our sitting or our practice, you should definitely ask. They're very helpful, the questions. They help us clarify our approach. So the third tenet or principle in this approach is called compassionate action. Compassionate action. Those are sort of these three principles that this certain Zen school follows. And if I look at them for a second, that there's this not knowing, that I approach my experience suspending judgment, kind of with an openness, curiosity, and investigation. That sense of mindful state of mind where there's a sort of an inquiry. What is this? What is this? What's happening? And I'm applying it specifically to meditation right now because I think this is our laboratory where we or our greenhouse, let's say, where we strengthen these seeds of mindful awareness. And we need to strengthen it in a sort of protected environment. And that's what meditation offers, is a stable environment. You got your seat, your place, your time. You turn off the phone and limit the distractions. And so we can notice more clearly when we are not paying attention. Whereas when we're involved in a lot of activity, it's a lot harder to notice the clarity or lack of clarity of the mind, because we're already thinking about the next thing to say or what we have to do next. So the not knowing is something where we're sort of taking reality on its terms, not necessarily on my drive. My drive is what I want out of things. And in its terms is what's happening. What am I receiving? And not knowing is opens naturally to the bearing witness. Bearing witness, that non-judgmental awareness, mirror-like mind, the mirror mind we use in the metaphor, or the open sky mind, that bearing witness, that open sky, or the still waters, reflecting things around them. Whatever metaphor works for you. But it's that bearing witness of being able to observe without comment, without comment. And the comments may come because that's the way the mind works. And there's nothing wrong with your comments. You just don't need to hold on to them. You accept them as part of what your mind does, and then you keep bearing witness, you keep observing. And those comments pass. And what you're observing is changing. So there's that open mind of not knowing. Yeah, I've sat and watched my breath many times before, but not this time. Not this time. Not today, and not at this hour. This hour has not happened before. It's different. And if I don't notice the difference, and if it seems the same to me, is that because the hour is the same? Well, that's an actual impossibility. So it must be because I'm not really paying attention enough to notice the differences. So we want to hone. Hone is to tune and direct our attention so that we can notice the subtlety and the subtle changes in things that look the same, because they are changing. And when we appreciate the changes in my breath, in my mood, in my thoughts, in my body, in my perceptions, in the feelings of pleasant and unpleasantness, in my state of consciousness as a whole, how self arises and self changes, how self arises and, I get a strong sense of self and then it changes. That sense of self, your consciousness, the fifth skandha, is something that also is changing with all the changing conditions of the other four skandhas. The form and feelings and perceptions and, desires or reactions. And then my sense of consciousness, of, it all coming together and seemingly forming a whole. That's shifting also very much so. And we notice that shift in self-awareness when we simply pay attention to all the phenomena that's happening in this moment more closely. Is our meditative awareness, because basically the project here and the intention is to have a much more gentle and adaptable and caring relationship to the changing reality around us. We do that by allowing ourselves to be less stuck where I think I am. So the first step of not knowing, the first application of the approach or the principle of not knowing is towards oneself and one's own mind. I'm not so sure who I am, what I am. I'm going to investigate moment by moment to observe this changing collection of conditions that I label. And I'm not saying a label isn't important. That's how we live conventionally. We call that the relative truth. But it's a relative truth, and we need to relax and rest into what's called the absolute truth. Okay, that of the emptiness of self. So, what is the purpose of all this? Which can seem sort of, wait, why is he telling me this? Because the not knowing and the bearing witness, the inquiry, the openness, and the observation and the awareness is what can enable us to relate in a more compassionate and caring way, because we're not so judgmental and stuck on our ideas and ourself. So compassionate action, the third principle, is an outgrowth and extends from the practice of not knowing and of bearing witness, of the open approach and the close observation of the changing moment self. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, few. So that beginner's mind, which is the not knowing mind, has many possibilities of who you are. You're not who you think you are. Okay? Who you think you are is a passing thought, a changing thought, and hopefully a useful thought. But by seeing those thoughts as conditions that change, we then can open up to more opportunities as a beginner on how to relate to the problem we're facing, this specific problem, whatever that problem may be. But to approach it in a fresh way, in a new way, that will lead to compassionate action. because things have changed, we can't rely on old solutions. We need to look with fresh eyes and a fresh heart. What's needed? The topic I wanted to speak of tonight is compassion as a practice. And I can't start talking about compassion unless I'm talking about mindfulness and awareness and non-self, and how that's related to our understanding of the self as a construct coming out of, these conditions, namely, as Buddha described it, the skandhas. So that's what I wanted to start with, to introduce that as, that's the background for compassion practice. We need to loosen our grasp on self. And we do that by observing how self is a sort of a product that's always changing. And we notice that by observing very closely the changes moment by moment in our breath, in our body, in our perceptions. One of the things Suzuki Roshi says is that may be so, but not necessarily so. One teacher said you should put a sign on your wall above your bed. So when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you see is, I might be wrong. I might be wrong. So we should always err on the side of compassion. Make an error. We should always, if we have a choice between being right and being kind, right should always lose. I might be wrong here. I might be wrong. Yeah, I mean, in everything, even our spiritual matters and our teachings. That's what we also call the pillar of doubt, the great doubt that I often talk about. Now, doubt, as we see, is also, and I'm relating all these pillars and these teachings to the practice of compassionate action. If our compassion is already defined as who is for and what I can give in terms of an action that helps. And again, compassion we can understand very clearly and simply as the intention and aspiration to end suffering of self and others. To aid in that objective. That it recognizes the suffering of others and it is touched. We recognize it. We're touched by it because we feel connected to the life and reality of others. And that's the emptiness aspect, is that ourselves are not so separate. So to contemplate and to observe changing self and how self is related, and my sense of self is very related to others. Someone's nice to me, I'm happy. They're mean to me, I'm upset. Then we can just expand beyond that of just how connected we are in terms of those who have helped us and those who have harmed us, how we have helped and harmed others. This interrelatedness is just a fact of our being. So to see the self as an individual is to see all the selves and all those who have contributed to who you are. So compassion is simply the aspiration as a practice in life and a path in life to end suffering. And if we want to end suffering in ourselves, we then soon realize that who and what we are is interrelated to who and what others are around us, and that my suffering is not independent from them. And that to work on my suffering is to simultaneously work on the suffering of others. Whether it's on a interpersonal level, if you're living in a house with others and they're having a hard time, it'll be hard to be happy unless you're kind of a sociopath. But if you're related in friendship or in kinship, then you know, their pain is your pain. Yeah, the Buddha said this clearly in several places, but one of them, like in the Dhammapada, verse 20, where it says, all tremble at violence. Life is dear to all. Putting oneself in the place of another, one should neither kill nor cause another to kill. Now that was talking about killing, you know, and that compassion that we need. And compassion here as a sort of instruction is simply putting yourself in the place of another. And that's something we think we do, but, you know, it can easily, the near enemy of compassion is pity. In Buddhism, they sometimes, at least in Mahayana, they sometimes talk about what's called the far enemy and the near enemy, meaning something that is directly opposed to it, the quality, and something that is opposed to it but seems similar enough that you might confuse it. It's like an ally who's actually a spy. So the far enemy of compassion is cruelty. Now, of course, I mean, we understand that the direct opposite of wanting to end suffering is to cause suffering. But the near enemy is when we still feel the separation. And it's pity, is feeling pity, or that they are sort of lesser. Or in some way they're to blame for their suffering because they kind of deserve it, or, you know, those poor people, even if we see it in another country, well, their countries must be doing something to make them, you know, starve and not get enough food. If we're looking at starving kids in another country, or, you know, yeah, I mean, their politician, their leaders are so bad that they're causing everyone to suffer. So it's sort of the blame game. That's the pity. And compassion, real compassion, not pity. You see, it can be sort of the near enemy because we feel sorry for them, but we're still kind of blaming. Now, remember, that doesn't mean that people aren't responsible. But when we're looking at the immediate and we want to open our hearts to the pain and suffering involved in that situation, it's not the time to start asserting or to define responsibility. On the level of opening our hearts, we just want to recognize the pain and feel it as if we're in their place. Put yourself in the place of another. What would it be like? You know, what would it be like if you had grown up with those conditions? And if we had grown up in those conditions, and remember, and when we're talking about compassion in difficult conditions, it's not just the pain that someone feels, but all of the poisons that the Buddha defines, and all the hindrances: ill will, anger, hatred, you know, and the anxiety and restlessness, the boredom and the doubt, and all those hindrances in the mind. But like the ill will and hatred and anger, as well as the sadness and the physical problems too. But we sometimes limit our compassion. We put some conditions on them, limitations on them. But understanding that hatred and ill will are serious forms of suffering. And if we want to open up our minds to not knowing, meaning we don't know the limits of our compassion. It's not that we don't know the pain. I don't know it really from their side because I'm not living it. Okay. But I want to also at the same time not define and limit how far my compassion can go. In this moment, maybe I reach a wall, I hit a wall. Okay, that's like, I cannot deal with like a Nazi right now. Right? I can say that. Right? I can't deal with someone who's really racist right now. I can make those statements. But at the same time, I can hold the not knowing. Tomorrow, I don't know. As a practice, I'm going to continue wearing down, the hardness of my heart so that I can put myself in the place of more people. I've read before the poem by Thich Nhat Hanh where he says, call me by my true names. And he says, I am the little girl in Uganda who's like starving and being lost her parents to war. And I am the arms merchant who's selling weapons to the government for money and out of greed. And I am the little refugee 12-year-old girl who threw herself over the boat and killed herself because she was raped by a pirate. And I am the sea pirate, who commits those terrible crimes. Now, I'm not saying we can go from sitting right now and having our abilities to suddenly entering into the mind of that place and that sort of limitless altruism and compassion. But as a bodhisattva, as someone who wants to take the bodhisattva vow, which is the aspiration to become enlightened so that I can help all beings, as a sort of a direction, a path, somewhere we should hold that possibility open. That my ultimate sort of goal is to have limitless compassion. That I will be able to put myself in the place of everyone and feel their pain in a way that motivates me to want to end it. So again, it's kind of like saying I want to be enlightened like the Buddha. It seems pretty distant right now, but that is fine. It is, from our vantage point of relative truth and where we're at right now. It is a distant peak. It is an Everest to climb, but it exists. This is what I want to say. That possibility, like the peak of Everest, exists in the world, and it has been realized and lived by many, many people. And that is our that's our direction. You can see that peak. It's not imaginary. And we're moving towards that. That's where we're walking to. It may take us lifetimes, but keep that peak in mind. Unlimited, expansive, wise, and infinite, even compassion. All sentient beings. In some of the past weeks, and I think I read it on the quote that Rowie sent with the update this week of Ajahn Liam, and I think I read it last week or a couple weeks ago, about finding, appreciating your enemies or the opponents or the difficult people as teachers, and they're teaching us patience and even compassion, and teaching us tolerance. And that if you don't have your qualities sort of tested, they're not going to be strengthened. Like working in the gym. I mean, no pain, no gain. Like you need to feel some resistance to make the muscle stronger. Our compassion is a sort of spiritual muscle. Through training, it becomes, bigger and stronger and can deal with more difficult situations. We can't take it for granted though. This is the point. If you are exercising and then you stop exercising for a week, you've probably lost a bit of the energy and endurance that you had. So too with this sort of compassion. We want to be really, really strong and dynamic with it. Now, if we do want to develop it to a really broad way, then we do have to acknowledge that we probably need to do more practice than we're doing. each one of us. Just like if I want to play in an orchestra, I need to practice more of whatever instrument I'm practicing. You know, so yeah, we all need to take on the practice of developing compassion a little more seriously, and to work on it on a daily basis. And part of it is that sense of bearing witness. This is the first stage, is the not knowing, and the bearing witness is simply looking around and recognizing suffering where it exists. You know, if someone's aggressive, they're suffering. When we go through the skandhas of the body, and I wanted to just mention this because I find the meditation on the different aspects of selfhood very helpful from different points of view. So when we look at the skandhas in terms of compassion practice, you know that there's a form and you have a body, and your body causes you problems. It causes pain often. Okay, fatigue, you get tired, and it's a form of suffering. You're hungry, and it's a form of suffering. Okay, you get a virus, you get sick in your stomach, you have diarrhea, you throw up. These are sufferings that happen on a bodily level. Okay, you have a form, you have a body, you suffer. You know what? Everyone around you, everyone you see on the street, everyone you see at work or in the supermarket, everyone in the shops, everyone in their cars has a body that's causing them pain. We should stop to consider, as my body causes me pain and suffering in my stomach, in my intestines, in my muscles. Yeah, I mean, all over, right? I mean, I lose my glasses and I feel like I'm a disabled, like I can't do anything, you know, and that's body causing me pain. Okay? So it's just on that level, our own contemplation of body can be a gateway to opening up a sense of compassion. Just as we have a body, so does everyone. Just as my body causes me daily difficulty. I mean, it's not chronic yet, but it will be. And we can look around and say, and some people have it much more difficult. You should, with those eyes of compassion, observe old people walking down the street. The natural reaction for young people is to feel impatient. Come on, let me get past. What am I going to be like? I'm headed there. If I'm in a car and I'm 80, if I'm driving, that's going to be a great thing. So to observe body, your body, how it causes you suffering and pain and reaction and judgment and frustration, all the more so, all the people around us are bodies, physical bodies. How we have feelings, look at the feelings, observe the feelings, notice how there's pain and pleasure, pain and pleasure. The pleasure you want to continue, the pain you want to avoid. Okay, pain and pleasure, pain and pleasure, pain and pleasure. You know, pleasant, unpleasant, pleasant, unpleasant. It's a hot day, I go in the air conditioning. It gets too cold, I go outside. It gets too hot. Pendulum, you know, pendulum swinging. Pain and pleasure, pain and pleasure. So that pendulum of feeling between swinging constantly. Very rarely is it just in the middle. It's always kind of going. Pleasant and unpleasant, pleasant and unpleasant. And if it feels in the center, it's just because it's moving slowly to one side. Don't worry, in soon a few minutes you'll be too tired to listen to me, and so you're going to feel unpleasant. Maybe you are already, and the unpleasant is over here. Or if you sit long enough, it'll definitely go over unpleasant. And you get up, and yeah, it's nice and pleasant. And then you stand there for 10 minutes, you gotta sit down. That swinging pendulum between pleasant and unpleasant, which is the level of feeling in the skandhas, just as you have it, so does everyone. So does everyone. Remember, I'm just following the skandhas and doing what the Buddha suggested in the Dhammapada, verse 20, was put yourself in the place of another. But understand, just as you are, so are they. So are they. So it's not such a crazy imagination that you have to do. It's not a leap of imagination, we say, to go into and understand on some intuitive and sort of a visceral level, physical, like experiential level of what other people feel and experience, because you're experiencing it. And they too have a body and they too have feelings. Feelings meaning the sensations of pain and pleasure. And what seems like neutral until you give it enough time. And then we have perceptions. And this is the level of, I might be wrong. The way I see things might be wrong. Might be wrong. And you know, it just says you wake up and you see things. And you have certain concepts of things. You perceive the world in a certain way. So does everyone else. And their perceptions may be different from yours. And so just as your perception may be wrong, you know, their perceptions may be wrong or right, but they definitely are causing, as your perceptions cause you problems, sometimes in the way you relate to the world. So too do their perceptions. They may be mistaken, and those mistakes may cause them to act in unwise ways. A level of perceptions, how I perceive reality. And then, of course, those perceptions, those concepts of labeling things and what things are. How do you perceive the situation? And then how I perceive it leads to my reaction, my reactivity. Not only is it pleasant or unpleasant and according to a certain perception of things, but I like it or I don't like it, I want it or I don't want it. And just as I want and don't want things, and that causes me a struggle to get what I want and the struggle to banish and get rid of what I don't want. So I'm in a constant struggle. And the struggle is subtle enough that I don't even think of it as a struggle. I just see it as like the force of life. So too does everyone act according to those impulses. You know? And yet they don't have the ability right now to see, or they're teaching most people to see how those are built one on another as conditioned reality that is not necessarily so. It's a product of a process that happens so quickly that suddenly I'm just like acting according to my desires and aversions and ignorance. Delusion, attachment, and aversion. That's driving me to make so many mistakes. And the consciousness I have of myself, all of it coming together, me, and it's just based on this illusion. A delusion of all these things coming together is solid. But when I notice a change, I notice that it's not solid. So observing the impermanence allows me to liberate myself a bit from those limitations. But I see how many people around me who are suffering are very attached to their sense of self because they don't understand the process that is very fluid and always impermanent and changing. But because I have a teaching that can show me that under the microscope of my mindfulness, I can liberate from some of the prison of the self so that I can be more effective and compassionate, understanding that many can't, and they're just stuck and they're behaving in a way that is causing suffering because of this product that they're making over and over again, moment by moment. So observing the skandhas closely, bearing witness to your own product. What product? Product of you. And seeing the holes in it can allow us to put ourselves in others' places and understand a little more compassionately. Understand, so as I suffer from this process of selfhood, so too do others. And many who don't have a path of liberation may suffer even more so because they don't have a way out yet. But I'm making the commitment to help in any way I can. So helping in any way we can. What is the best way we can help? Again, I'm waiting for anyone to interrupt me.
I have something I can interrupt you with.
That's great.
It's actually related to that question of how you can help. And if it's okay for me to read a really, really quick passage I came across today, and it's a perfect example. It's not a Buddhist passage, but I just felt that it would be really appropriate. And it goes, it's about an anthropologist, social anthropologist, Margaret Mead, that was quite a prominent anthropologist in the 60s and 70s. And it says, anthropologist Margaret Mead was asked by a student what she considered to be the first sign of a civilization in a culture. The student expected me to talk about fish hooks or clay pots or grinded stones. But no, Mead said that the first sign of civilization in an ancient culture was a femur, thigh bone, that had been broken and then healed. Mead explained that in the animal kingdom, if you break your leg, you die. You cannot run from danger, get to a river for a drink, or hunt for food. You are meat for prowling beasts. No animal survives a broken leg long enough for the bone to heal. A broken femur that has healed is evidence that someone has taken time to stay with the one who fell, has bound up the wound, has carried the person to safety, and has tended the person through recovery. Helping someone else through difficulty is where civilization starts, Mead said. So basically, the first sign of a civilization and a civilized culture is compassion. And seeing someone else's suffering and being committed to helping them through that and relieve that suffering. And I just thought that would be very appropriate for today's talk.
That's a beautiful passage, really. It's a very beautiful passage. And, I'm hoping that it's, that broken femur and the healed bone and the person who helped, it would be even more telling if they weren't necessarily related. Sometimes we notice in the animal kingdom how animals, are very caring for each other when they're in the same family and they care for their young. But there's a lot of competition and aggression among other animals and groups. So if we can take what we care as part of ourselves, and I think the key in the Buddhist understanding of this is, though most people will protect and give their lives, animals give their lives for their children. They really do. They try to distract the predator to attack them. The mother will try to draw the predator away to attack them and save the kids, meaning she might give up her life. That's a true act of compassion. And the Buddha, there are some examples of the Buddha doing that. But the vision we can try to cultivate from those examples and from this femur is, could we see everybody as our child or mother or father? Could that be like this huge view that we'll care for them as if they're our own child or our own mother? And the Buddha says that in the Metta Sutra, just as a mother sees her child. So like we should love and care for everyone. And so the most advanced civilization, so the beginning is a civilization in that, but the most advanced civilization are those who care for all broken femurs in the world. Even if it's a stranger. So yeah, we got our beginnings. We got good beginnings. We just got lost along the way.
Exactly, but I think also not not even just if it's a stranger, but if it's someone that evokes difficult feelings in us, and still want to help them and still feel the call to help them. And I actually wanted to ask you, like, how do you, I can understand developing compassion, as you said, to strangers or someone, people, not only loved ones, but people that are neutral. But how do you approach the people that truly evoke difficult emotion? And not even, you know, not even personally in my life, but politicians, like figures, even not even necessarily, but also people in your life, because I feel that's the most challenging for me.
Yeah, true. Well, there's two things I want to say to that. One is kind of funny. Like I remember reading about compassion a few years ago already. It's already been a few years that this post came up, and they talked about how some of these practitioners in Buddhist communities had a picture of Donald Trump on their altar beside the Buddha. They like had him on the altar. Meaning they wanted to give him as much compassion as possible. They didn't see him as a Buddha. They said, like, this is the person who's my biggest challenge, and I'm going to put him on my altar, his image, right? Now, the other thing but number two, what I want to say is, like, you can start with the hardest thing, but the main thing is what I was suggesting as the metaphor of the greenhouse, and not the greenhouse effect, but the greenhouse as the literal greenhouse. What it's originally used for is to cultivate plants that are not strong enough yet to be outside. Yeah. So think of your compassion as a sprout or a little seedling that you're cultivating. And you need to have it in a protected area. And you can't expose it immediately to a storm or to winter. You know, otherwise it won't survive. But once it gets strong enough and large enough, and that might take for a tree like 3 or 4 years, then you can finally take it outside and plant it outside, and it will survive the winter. It might not flourish during that time. It may just like hold itself, but you know, it will, because you cultivated it in you know, conditions that you increased in difficulty. So I think it's to go from, you know, having compassion for, you know, our friends and loved ones, to then going to the most difficult places, is like running a kilometer and then wanting to do the marathon. You know, we just need to work on it steadily to increase the distance. You know, and in the same way, when we talk about metta, loving kindness cultivation, as we go through these 4 stages of, you know, directing it to oneself, to a loved one who you naturally want to be happy. You just see them and it makes you feel happy, and of course you want them to be happy, and you're happy when they're happy. To a stranger you don't know, and then that's easier, but it still is kind of awkward. And then finally to a difficult person. But one of the important things that I've learned with the metta meditation, and we can apply this to compassion as well, wishing someone to not suffer in all the ways, whether they're suffering anger as I suffer anger, whether they're suffering physical pain as I suffer physical pain. So there's a couple of ways to develop. One, you go through stages to work on the people for whom it's easier. 2, when you do direct it to somebody who's difficult or even cause you pain, you do it for a short amount of time. You can stay with yourself and with a loved one for a long time, giving them compassion, you know, but with a difficult person, you spend like 1 cycle going through it. You don't think, I can stay with this. 3, it's not a feeling, it's an intention. That's an important difference. Compassion is not feeling. Love and loving kindness, metta, is not a feeling, it's not an emotion. It's an intention. It's a wish. you're wishing, even just on your mental mind, that they won't suffer anymore. And then putting yourself in their place in a small way of saying, just as seeing the unity, seeing the sameness of self and other. Seeing the sameness of self and other means that as I went through the skandhas, I have a body that causes me problems, they have a body that causes them problems. I have feelings and emotions that cause me problems, they suffer from emotions. I'm really upset when I'm angry and I do unwise things, you know, and I usually cause some harm to myself and others. So too do they, and they lose control, you know. And I have a sense of self and a consciousness that I often like am not aware of being really fixed and identifying strongly with it, and you know, leading then to a lot of problems. And so too, they have a sense of self that they have no idea is actually like empty. So I can go through, and so there's I think 3 or 4 different ways of relating that you can experiment with and do it gently in short amounts of time with a very difficult person, even if you want to do that. Number 1, greenhouse, like, don't think you can go out into the storm without developing it a bit stronger with easier, you know, conditions and people for whom it's natural. That's one aspect. When you do apply it to people who are difficult or situations, you do it for a short amount of time, and then you go back to where it's easier, so you can make sure that the compassion is staying like alive. 3, it's not an emotion, it is an attitude and an intention. It's a wish for the end of suffering. And 4, you not only put yourself in their place, but you put them in your place. Meaning, you know, you kind of switch places. You know that I have a body, they have a body. I have feelings, they have feelings. I have perceptions, they have perceptions. I have a consciousness of self that is like stuck, and they do too. You know, and so we can sort of identify not with their actions of harm, but identify with their humanness. That they're a product of the skandhas just as I am. You know, and my product causing me problems, so too do theirs. So, self and other, that's a Buddhist kind of term. Seeing the identity of self and other doesn't mean that you're the same person, but you have the same process going on. You have the same process of selfing that is causing problems. So that's the 4th level of compassion practice. When the Buddha says putting yourself in another's place, put yourself in the place of how, you know, those 4 different levels. You know, I can't know what it's like to be a politician in, let's say, the Knesset, who is like greedy and serving only my friends and corrupt. I can't know what that's like, but I can know what it's like to have a body, to have sensations and feelings and anger and jealousy and fear and greed. I can know those things. And then I can know that as I suffer from it, so too does he. You know, and as I want to stop it, so too I want him to stop it. Even if on a selfish level, that if he ends his suffering of anger and greed, then I'll be in a better situation too, because he'll relate better to other people, including, you know, maybe the country if he's the leader. So as the Dalai Lama said, if you want to be really selfish, then you should practice compassion. Because if someone else stops suffering, then they'll stop causing suffering to other people, including you. So the best way to end suffering is that the person who is causing harm doesn't suffer anymore. Then they won't have reason to cause harm. So it's almost kind of this Buddhist logic, which is, you know, not what we're used to thinking. So what is the right thing to do? There's 2 things I want to share with you guys. 2 short things. Don't worry, short. One of them is this koan in the Blue Cliff Records, case 14, where there's this Zen master called Yumen. And a monk asked him, he was a very big teacher, and a monk asked him, what is the, what are the teachings of a whole lifetime? What are the teachings of a whole lifetime? And he's referring to, the monk is referring specifically to the whole lifetime of the Buddha, the 49 years that he was teaching, you know, from his enlightenment at, you know, age 29 to his death. And it's 49 years, they say, or 45. Anyway, long time he's teaching. What are the teachings of a whole lifetime? And it can be taken as the Buddha's lifetime, and also our own lifetime if we're practicing for a whole lifetime. What is the teachings of it? And Yuman answered, you know, you would think that Yuman would say, all conditioned things are impermanent, because that's how the Buddha summarized his teachings, right? I mean, on his deathbed, that's what he said. Those are the last words, the last teaching. You know, all conditioned things are subject to, you know, dissolution. Disillusion will come apart. All things are impermanent. Okay, that seems like the right summary of the teachings. But Yuman said the teachings of a whole lifetime are an appropriate statement. So, an appropriate statement, and that has become a sort of a flag that is waved in Zen circles. The teachings of a whole lifetime are an appropriate statement. Okay? Another way we could understand that is upaya. Upaya. Doing the right thing at the right time. That's an appropriate statement, whether it's in words, speech, thought, or action. An appropriate statement. That's skillful means. And that is a definition, another definition of compassion. So he could have said compassionate action, but I think compassionate action may miss the necessity, the element of appropriateness. It needs to be the right thing at the right time. And that's the not knowing mind. I don't really know what's needed in this situation. I need to pay close attention, to bear witness, and then to intend. My intention is to help. And then from that process of open mind, observing mind, and intention to help, I'm more likely to do the right thing. An appropriate statement. That's how Yuman answered it. Right? So when we talk about compassion, we have to relate compassion to the specific moment. That's why it's appropriate. What is needed here and now? I can't just say in general. There's no general compassion. There's only specific compassion. There's no general compassion. There's only specific compassion. Okay? And that's an appropriate moment. An appropriate statement. It's the upaya of this. But to know that, I need to observe. And to really observe, I need to let go of my ideas. That's not knowing. All this practice works together. And our meditation is a foundation for it. Because that's where we practice all of this. So I'd like to leave you with 3 verses, 3 stanzas from a text that we studied last year or a couple of years ago, I don't know. It's called The 37 Practices of a Bodhisattva by Tomke Zangpo, who lived in the year, around the year 1300. So the 37 practices of Bodhisattva, and I'm just going to read the first 3 verses. The opening of it, the opening of the 37. We went through all of them once, but now I just want to, as a sort of a motivational ending, to give us the opening of these 37 practices of a Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva, the enlightened being who lives her life with the vow, I will help all others. And that's why I'm doing this. My goal is to become enlightened so that I can be the most effective help I can be. So here are the first 3 of the 37. Number 1. Right now, you have a good boat, fully equipped and available, but hard to find. To free others and you from the sea of samsara. Day and night, fully alert and present. Study, reflect, and meditate. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. Okay? You have the raft, the teachings. You have the boat. The boat has everything you need to cross the sea of samsara. It has everything. Okay? But the only way we can really navigate it and travel on this boat is, as you said, day and night, fully alert and present. Study, reflect, and meditate. Okay? Study the Dharma, reflect on what it means to you, and meditate. Empty your mind and be open to the reality of others. That is the practice of a bodhisattva. Attraction to those close to you catches you in its currents. Aversion to those who oppose you burns inside. Okay, those are two poisons, right? Attraction to those close to you catches you in its currents. Aversion to those who oppose you burns inside. Indifference that ignores what needs to be done is a black hole. Once again, indifference that ignores what needs to be done is a black hole. Okay? Compassion is specific action. And finally, the last verse of this. Leave your homeland. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. I'll let you think about what that means, leave your homeland. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. And the last one for tonight that I'd like to share with you as the preliminary, meaning the beginning practices of bodhisattva. The first three practices that will help lay the foundation for the compassionate life we want to live. Don't engage disturbances. When your mind is disturbed, don't engage them. Don't get involved. And the reactive emotions generally fade away. Okay? Like, you don't need to push your emotions away. Just don't get involved with the crazy thoughts you have, and the strong feelings will fade. Don't engage distractions. And spiritual practice naturally grows. This is important because distractions will happen. Don't think that the aware mind doesn't have distractions. It just means you don't engage with those distractions. All the thoughts that come up, don't engage with them. They are what they are. Let them be. And spiritual practice naturally grows. Keep awareness clear and vivid, and confidence in the way arises. Okay, if you keep your awareness clear and vivid, confidence in your way will arise. And finally, rely on silence. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. Which is my cue to stop talking. So, unless anyone has anything you want to say, that's really nice if you do. Otherwise, we'll spend a couple minutes to sit and finish. Taking the last verse very seriously.
Daniel, there is a question from Alice in the chat.
I didn't see.
Who made Aliyah and returned to our homeland? Does we mean we cannot be bodhisattvas? Okay.
Well, you'll have to reflect on that teaching. You'll have to reflect, study, reflect, and meditate. That's pretty much the only answer I can recommend. Mm-hmm. Probably homeland's not what you think it is. Let's take a minute now to return to silence together, share it as a sort of safe and soft and welcoming space. Think of silence not only as sound, but silence as space. Silence is a space that holds everything that might come up in your mind. Silence is a space that accepts you and others completely. That is the silence that we can rely on.